Alrighty, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Chupacabra Tutorials channel. I'm your host, Larry the Chupacabra, and today we're talking about how to edit raw photos inside of Adobe Bridge using the Adobe Camera Raw function. Now, you can edit these without Adobe Bridge. You can open Camera Raw via a raw photo in Photoshop, and you can actually edit regular photos through Camera Raw in Photoshop. But this is just a lot nicer when you work with multiple pictures. And I thought I would do this tutorial today because I got this picture here of a rooster. Whoops. And basically what happened was my neighbor gave away her chickens and her rooster, and she wanted me to take a picture of a rooster because he was really friendly, and so she could remember him before we gave him away for her. So I got a picture of him, and I need to fix it. And I also have a couple other sample images here. I've got one of the storage stack of stuff underneath my stairs in my barn, which I need to clean up still. I had some helpers over, and they kind of left a mess for me. And just a picture of out in the pasture, because it has like a really fun cloud motif in the background. So I'm just going to select these three inside of Adobe Bridge, and this is really just a specialized file browser that makes it easier to find your files and manipulate them between multiple Adobe products. So we're just going to right-click this, and you just say Open in Camera Raw, and that will open up this lovely window that I've made smaller so it's easier for you guys and gals at home to see. And this is where we'll have the ability to adjust the tinting, the temperature of our image. Maybe it's too blue and we need to brighten it up, give it a little bit of warmth. Maybe it's too magenta, so we need to green it up a little bit. You got all these tools right here to manage those things, and we'll just get started here. So the idea, for anyone who might not be familiar with what a raw photo is, smartphones now have the ability, and also big expensive DSLR cameras, to take a picture that's about 5 to 50 times bigger than your average picture, because it has like enough data to comprise, well, 5 to 50 pictures all on its own. And the idea here is that you can make adjustments if something's a little bit fiddly after the fact, so that you don't have to spend so much time fiddling when you're out in the field taking pictures. So the first thing we're going to do with this chicken here, this rooster, is he's got some nice kind of green tint colors here, so I really want to brighten up his feathers. So we'll go down here to the shadows, and we'll just pull that slider up. And as you can see right here, it's really brightening up his feathers, so it's a lot easier to see. Now, these photos are a little grainy that you might be able to see, because these were taken with my smartphone using the app Camera FV5, which is a lovely app. It's only like $2. And it lets you take automatic, auto-focused pictures on the go that are raw, so that you don't really have to worry about them quite so much. Let's zoom back out here. So we got some of the feathers back, but I'm being very distracted by the bright glow from this chicken coop's door that you can see. The door is open. I snapped a picture of this bad boy before he could move, because I wanted to get a picture of his face. It's really important to get the soul of the animal. You can really, it brings the soul of the rooster out when you capture their eye that has almost no emotion. So we're gonna grab down the highlight slider and just bury it. In fact, we might just go up here to exposure. I'm gonna select the numbers and just tick down the arrow a couple times, because in this picture it's gonna be a lot easier to bring up the shadows than it is to bring down the highlights. So manipulating the exposure is sort of like, it's a sledgehammer, but with careful precision, you can use it to reduce the overall brightness of the photo. So I'm going to bring up the blacks here, so I can continue to reveal the rooster, but I don't want to kill my contrast, you see. So there we go. I feel like I need to dump this exposure just a couple ticks. And that doesn't look bad. Yeah. I can just drag I can click and drag the magnifying tool around to get a better look at some of the details. So this is actually looking pretty good. I can get a really good shot of him. I mean, in reality, this is a really poopy setting, very literally, to take a picture of anything, but it is what it is. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select the crop tool up here, and I'm going to draw a square, and I'm going to trim off some of the excess here, so we just have our pal, the rooster here. And he's a pretty suave guy. He's got very beautiful colors, and besides being a little bit freaked out that I came and got him for the gentleman that adopted him, and actually I'm going to crop this once more. Going to adjust the crop lines because I'm still getting more stuff in the background than I really need. There we go. I could in theory just trim off his tail a little bit. There we go. That looks pretty good. So what do I need to do here? I've kind of toned everything up and out. And if I want to kill some more of this light, I could bump up the... Whoa, that's too much. I could bump up the contrast, but if you bump the contrast up too much, like I just did to 100%, he starts to look like a piece of over-crisped Kentucky Fried Chicken. And we don't want that. That's not a good image for the owner. She would not enjoy that at all. So I also don't... So if you bring these whites too far down, you start to gray out the image a little bit, and that's not always the best course of action. We want to preserve some of that contrast without unnaturally destroying it. And this is actually not bad. I could fiddle with this all day, though. And something to note for you guys at home is something I was always taught, even in a studio environment, was that almost every digital picture needs a little smidge of sharpening, which is what this clarity is down here, before it goes off to the races. Now, before I go through all of these settings and just kind of quickly run through them and explain what they do for you folks before going to the next picture, I'd like to note that, for the most part, this is a tool that is used in conjunction with Adobe Photoshop, unless, of course, you're just making a quick dinky photo like this for somebody who, well, they got rid of their pet and they want something simple to remember them by. Typically, you just make basic adjustments in this panel, and you can also make, lighting adjustments and detail adjustments, grayscale, toning, special effects, camera correction, presets and snapshots. Typically, you just do basic adjustments, then you bring it into Photoshop to do the really fine-tune, heavy lifting adjustments, or if you have Lightroom, then you'd bring this into Lightroom to start making some adjustments. But on the whole, you've got the temperature up here, you've got the exposure, which is the overall brightness or time that the lens was exposed to this picture. You've got the contrast, which is the contrast between dark darks and light lights. Highlights, which are these really bright sections like sunlight or reflections. You've got the shadows, which are just the dark, shadowy portions. And then the blacks are just anything that would be black or dark in the photo, so this just lightens up everything that's even the slightest bit dark. And then the whites are the opposite. Anything that's the slightest bit white will be darkened or lightened when you drag this around. Clarity is the sharpness of the image. Vibrance is how vibrant and bright, and we can even bump that up a little bit since he's got some color here. That's how intense the colors are, and saturation just adds to the colors that are already there by just layering up more of the same colors. So that's actually looking pretty good. Underneath this is like our brightness curve where we can start to adjust the brightness with these sliders, and then you can even go with the point graph. You've got the sharpening if I wanted to fine-tune this inside of Camera Raw. But for the most part, I'm one of the people that prefers, unless I want to use some fine-tuned color correction here, I prefer to bring this into Photoshop. But don't be afraid to leave this here, and you can always come back to this later if you're in Photoshop. You can always right-click the main layer. Excuse me, I'm a little bit congested this evening. You can always open this back up in Photoshop and make more fine-tune adjustments if you so desire. So here we've got split toning. I mean, basically, these are all just here for you to adjust different, this is color control for, maybe something is a little bit too bright or colorful, so you want to tone that down. You've got lens correction. This is basically for, on a camera-by-camera basis, you can fix common lens issues with certain models of camera. These are just special effects like de-hazing, This sort of removes graininess from the picture or adds it, stuff like that. And then here you've got camera calibration. Again, this is for fixing issues with known issues with cameras, so that you can use this to make a preset if you know that your camera doesn't treat blues correctly, or it makes like reds way too bright. So stuff like that, and you can make presets, and you can even make snapshots that you can use to quickly make the same adjustments to every image if they're all taken in the same controlled environment. So next up, let's go to this lovely image of clouds. Boy, those are certainly clouds. Aren't they just the cloudiest of clouds? Boy, I'm feeling so cloudy today. So what would we do with this picture? Let me grab the hand and drag this back center line. So really, the reason I took this picture is I like cloudscapes. If you ever look up Larry Chupacabra on, what's the name of that thing? Instagram, you will totally be able to see that I love my clouds. They are so cloud related, and they also come occasionally with cloud accessories, and I like the shape of this cloud here in the background, and I'm gonna take, there's a house right over here that I don't necessarily want to keep, and I like to keep a smidgen of fence in my pictures, because it just reminds people that this is what you see when you live on the edge of urban town place. So the trouble here is that, again, the highlights during the sunset period were just so overblown that it's hard to see what is going on in this picture. So I'm going to bring up the contrast and just bury the whites. And this is a kind of a hard picture to fix inside of Camera Raw, so this is one that I would definitely just do the broad strokes with. Because, well, it's just really hard to control these lights without a luminosity curve. Although I could knock down the exposure, and that doesn't look terrible. Then I gotta bring up all the shadows, and yeah, it's not a bad photo, but it's not a great one to edit inside of Camera Raw. So we can mess with the highlights here for some more fine-tuning. It's really, sometimes when you get started, or even when you're a professional, you can kind of see what you need, but it's not always the most apparent where you need to put it, the different curves, in order to get the desired effect. So there I just needed to bump down the darks to darken up the different contours of these clouds, and that did a pretty okay job in this tone curve. And I could even keep messing around in this point curve if I really wanted. And this is just like the one in Photoshop, so you can just kind of drag stuff around. But personally, I like sliders because it limits how messed up something can get if you mess with one point on the dot chart. So I like the point chart, but it's what it is. So this is ready to go into Photoshop. And you can tell which ones you've made adjustments to because you see here in the sidebar, they have little markings on them that tells you that this one's been cropped and it's had the bars adjusted. And if I use some of these other tools to do things like, this is the red eye removal tool. I could use this to remove red eye. Which one was this? This is the leveling tool. All these tools are basic photo repair tools. Which one was this? This is the parametric curve tool. You got all these basic tools that mirror stuff that's directly from Photoshop. It's just kind of in a more neat and confined pad here, where it's just the essentials, then you can move it into Photoshop. So the issue here, and this is why I clicked on the temperature gauge for the radial filter, is this is awfully yellow, because this is like a very brown barn. So like you would actually, I don't like this radial filter. Get out of here with your sauce. All right, I need to adjust the temperature so it's more blue. Not too blue, just a little bit more. And then we'd have to put a photo filter on this or something to correctly warm it back up. And this one's got a couple problems. It's got too much highlight, which you can... So you see that there's like these red markings here. There's red marks everywhere, and they're evil. So what happens is you got this color histogram, and when the colors get too overblown, you can click on these two little triangles in either corner, and too bright whites will become red, so that tells you immediately that you need to tone down your whites, because they're way too intense, and you might even need to reduce the overall exposure to fix that bugger, But if they're a really small spot like that, I would not necessarily worry about that. So that's pretty good. And if we go to this blacks here, in the blackest of the blackest, well, actually, where's a good black? Over here, there's a shoebox here with mouse bait in it. That's pretty black though, so let's bring the shadows down. Bring them all the way down. Did that not want to work? Shadows? Up there it goes. So the shadows are blue when you mess those up. And we know that now that because of these shadows, that the shadows are too intense because of that blue coloration. And some cases, all you can really hope for with this tool is that you keep it from being like little red splotches from showing up, and you keep little dark splotches from showing up. So, yeah. And this is fine to bring into Photoshop. I'll sharpen that a little bit, and I'll go back to the other picture, and I can sharpen that a little bit. And there's all sorts, if you're wondering how you could use this, you have Photoshop for whatever reason, you're wondering how you could use tools like this to improve your quick on-the-go photography from your phone, just look up an app or see if there's a feature on your phone to take raw photos. Not all photos come in DNG. There's all kinds of raw formats. There's even raw formats. There are all kinds. And then I could take these into Photoshop by clicking Open Image, or what I'm going to do with the rooster is I'm just going to save him out as Katie's rooster, because that's the name of my neighbor, Katie. And let's see here. I did some of my sister's cosplay photos. She does cosplay with horses. So I'm going to name this rooster, Katie's rooster. And then I'm just going to leave these blank because I don't need all these numbers. That is completely unnecessary. I'm going to save it as a JPEG. I'm going to save it as a 10 quality JPEG. That's about as much as you're going to get out of most JPEGs. I'm going to leave it at its default size so that it doesn't get automatically resized. It's only an 8-bit color image, and Adobe RGB is pretty good. And I think that's about all I need for right here. And this tool is really nice, so you can automatically save out large batches of files as a different file format. In case you don't need to edit them, you can just select a bunch of them, and then you can open this, save images, and then just quickly batch save them to however you like. So I will save that out. This little ticker down here at the bottom will tell me everything is good to go. I will click Done. And now each of these images has been adjusted automatically in the preview window to show you what it looks like. And so that's how you use raw photos. They're great. I love them. They make life so much easier. You can retune some parts. You can even fix somewhat out of focus images. 10 out of 10 stuff. But just remember that not all raw photos are created equal, and there are a bunch of softwares out there for making these basic adjustments before bringing them into something like Photoshop, and you might prefer doing the bulk of your editing inside of a raw editing program. I do know a few people that like to do that. I don't remember what software they use, but that's basically what you do. So that and this rooster is it for this one, ladies and gentlemen. I've been your host, Larry the Chupacabra. Join me again next time for some more tutorial goodness, and maybe suggest some stuff that you'd like to see explained in finer detail. And until next time, I've been Larry. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and toodaloo, everybody.